In 2007, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels asked 7 volunteer citizen leaders to serve on the Blue Ribbon Indiana Commission for Local Government Reform. Their mission? To recommend ways to streamline local government and in doing so help thousands of hard-working public servants provide the highest quality service to constituents. After much research, public input, and deliberation, the Commission offered a list of 27 recommendations designed to streamline the layers of local government to create more accountability and greater efficiency. For county government, rather than the current 3 county commissioners, the Commission recommended the establishment of a single elected county chief executive and the establishment of a single unified legislative body for county government. The Commission also recommended transferring responsibility for administering the duties of the county auditor, treasurer, recorder, assessor, surveyor, sheriff, and coroner to the county executive, among other duties. The Commission recommended retaining a local government role for property tax assessment under a county assessor appointed by the county executive, creating a county-wide body to oversee public safety services, and consolidating emergency public safety dispatch by county or multi-county region, and using communication systems compatible with the statewide 800 megahertz communication system. The Commission recommended transferring responsibility for all funding of the state's trial court system to the state, including public defenders and probation, as well as moving funding of child welfare from counties to the state. In terms of township government, the Commission recommended transferring all responsibility for administrating the duties currently performed by township government to the county executive. The Commission recommended establishing a county-wide tort relief levy. In Marion County, the responsibilities for the township small claims court would be switched to Superior Court, the Commission urged. For Indiana schools, the Commission recommended merging districts with student populations below 2,000 and requiring that school corporation bonds be approved by the fiscal body of the municipal or county government containing the greatest proportion of assessed value in the school district. The Commission also urged districts to collaborate on purchasing, and the Commission recommended that districts conduct school elections during November in even years. For municipalities, the Commission recommended allowing the City Council to appoint the City Clerk, moving municipal elections to even years, and transferring the responsibilities of municipal health departments to the county health department. For schools and other special taxing districts, the Commission suggested reorganizing library systems by county and providing permanent library services for all citizens. Budgets and bonds of library and other special taxing districts would be approved by the fiscal body of the municipal or county government with the greatest proportion of assessed value in the unit seeking approval. And the Commission would strengthen the current joint purchasing infrastructure for libraries. For all units of government, the Commission recommended expanding voluntary coordination and consolidation of units and services and giving voters more power to compel consolidation. Local governments would be allowed to establish service districts with differentiated levels of service and corresponding tax rates. The Commission would facilitate local improvement efforts using best management and business practices, and would prohibit employees of a local government unit from serving as elected officials within the same local unit of government. An Indiana Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations would be formed to monitor progress toward these recommendations and conduct additional research. Additionally, a statewide benchmarking system would be established to monitor progress. Finally, the Commission also recommended designating a state office that would provide technical help to local government.
Hello and thank you for joining us. The program you're watching is part of a series of programs sponsored by City TV and the Mike Down Center for Indiana Politics at IPFW. And the topic is local government restructuring. And in particular, we're going to be talking about the recommendations of the governor's formed commission, the Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform. You just saw an overview of 27 recommendations made by the commission. But in this program, we're going to spotlight those recommendations that deal specifically with county government. And we're pleased to be joined by a very distinguished panel of county officials. And we want to start and just, again, we're focusing on those 8 recommendations that deal with county government. And the first deals with the county commissioner. It recommends establishing a single person instead of the 3 county commissioners that we have now, but a single county executive to run county government, basically. And I want to throw this open really to the panel about your thoughts on that very specific, very key, some would say very controversial recommendation. In fact, two of our county commissioners are here as well. Let me start with you, Commissioner Peters. Your thoughts on that recommendation in particular?
Well, thanks, Vince, and thanks for having us all here today. You know, I've always been a fan of a single point of accountability, and I think to that end, I do think that a single executive makes sense to those who want to see government operate more quickly. A lot of times I got to be a little bit careful in what I say because I'm not necessarily representing the Board of Commissioners as much as I'm representing myself, and for that reason, things seem to get bogged down a little bit in county government. So as far as one point of accountability, I think that a single commissioner would in fact enhance the speed in which we do things.
I want to throw this out to Commissioner Brown, who's here as well. Your thoughts?
Well, I think everyone knows I'm a fan of single point accountability also. Actually, I think the immediate thing that we can do and that we are doing is strengthening the administrative future within the Commissioner's office. We haven't moved fully to a county administrator, but we're putting some things in place to make that happen over time with the way we operate, with the level of staff that we have. The single county executive, one of the reasons that I think it's a good idea, you know, it's really kind of hard to argue with the group of folks that create a unanimous decision based on that precept. So I think academically it makes a lot of sense. We all know politically there are ramifications to things like this. Pretty obvious last year in the State House. It goes through both House and Senate, and at the end of the day it crashes in a committee. So this is for the state legislature, obviously, to decide, but I think that it does have merit.
Any other thoughts on this? Because this not only is a change that would affect the Commissioner's office, but it affects a number of positions now that are elected positions, because this is a very, the way the Commission recommended it, a very powerful county executive, because he would have jurisdiction over a number of offices that are elected positions now. Other thoughts?
I would say that I don't know that they necessarily would have jurisdiction over the elected offices. The way county government works, those are very independently elected offices, are just that, independently elected offices. And the commissioner's jurisdiction does not often infringe in those areas, unless I'm incorrect. Commissioner Brown or yours?
No, the way the report's set up, it would be a lot of these offices go away.
And, I mean, that's correct the way it is now. Absolutely correct.
Oh,
but
sure.
According to the recommendations, yes. I mean, a number of positions that are elected currently would be appointed by the county executive.
Right, but those are separate issues. I mean, I think whether or not we have a single county executive, or if we do away with a number of county elected positions.
Which it gets me to the report, and talking to John Stafford, it really brings out what he said their intent was. Administrative functions be non-elected officials and be appointed by a single county executive or a county council, whichever the case may be. When you look at any kind of business model, you don't have any kind of model where three people try and run an organization, and to the commissioners' defense, they do the best that they can, but if one has a direction and wants to go this way, they've got to find some common ground for somebody to agree with them on them, and as I run my business, I would never want to try and run it that way. A single county executive makes the most sense, and I'm in favor of, to the point of rolling in administrative functions to someone else to give them a little bit more pyramid type structure versus a flat county structure makes a lot more sense.
Therese?
If I may, I can appreciate the concept, but I guess the other part that doesn't seem to play well, at least in my line of thinking, is that we're representing the people, and I think that the people have a say in the people that they elect. And I think in a single county elected position, county executive, whether it includes the constitutional offices or not, a voice is somewhat lost. And the dialogue, I think that's where, with the three, not that it's a perfect system, but you do have three individuals that people have elected to theoretically meet what their mindset is and hash it out publicly, what those issues are.
Sure.
Well, I have to agree with Paula on the fact, are we going to have the single accountability of the elected officials going to run the county, and then is he going to appoint? In other words, I think there's two totally different things we need to look at, because I would be very concerned if we have one county executive that appoints all these other positions. That person is going to have so much power that if you help them get elected, you get a job someplace. So I think we need to be very concerned about that. Therese says, the voters need to be able to have an input on it. So I don't believe all these other elected jobs that they say should be done away with should be done away with.
Let me ask either of the commissioners to kind of weigh in on that, because again, those are two different issues. I mean, going from 3 commissioners to 1, but then also part of the recommendation is to have this county executive oversee all of these other administrative functions that are currently done by elected officials. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you go to a single county executive structure, you've got to ask yourself, is this model going to be as effective as it is in business, as it is in the city? And you've got to ask yourself whether or not those are even effective models. If you can answer that yes, they probably are, then I think the things that need to be rolled into that include finance, include operations, include the things that typically fall under a CEO who runs a successful business.
My 2 cents on that is, one thing the commissioner system does provide is openness, and I think that's what people want, is more and more openness in their government. So that is a benefit to having 3 commissioners. They talk about the business model, but we all know there's partnerships, that it could be multiple people. And if people work together well in a partnership, in business, the customer decides. Are the services being delivered? Are you making money? Those kind of things are the internal parts. So it's important to remember that it matters who the commissioners are in the 3-commissioner system. And back to this whole concept of the administrative stuff, the minutia, working with the other entities, if that is done and expedited well by a qualified administrator, that allows the commissioners, whether it's 1 or 3, to work at that more executive, forward-looking level, and in a very open manner.
Let's move on to another issue, and we'll come back to that administrative role as well. Another part of the recommendations establishes a single unified legislative body for county government and expand legislative membership to ensure sufficient representation for rural, suburban, and urban populations. Again, the idea of really the county council being more a legislative body and not purely a fiscal body. Thoughts?
It certainly has appealed to me. And I think modeling it much after the way the city is constructed, I think would make a lot more sense in that county council now, we're making fiscal decisions without the responsibility or the ability to make legislative decisions. Doesn't make much sense. To me, I think it would make our jobs a lot more effective and in some ways a lot easier. I like the idea of legislative powers that they be transferred to a county council.
Other thoughts? Let me ask some of our other county council members who are present today.
Well, I agree with Maye that there's a lot of times on some of the actions that we carry through that we're unable to see them all the way through the program, and it has to be turned over to somebody else. But it is a lot more responsibility as far as a county council person to have that. So,
Is it something that makes sense?
I believe so. I mean, if you're going to restructure government, you wouldn't do it the way you have it today. So it goes back to, if you're going to put things together and start over from scratch, you'd separate out the commissioner's powers and put them somewhere else. It's a necessary thing that needs to happen if you're going to redo it all over again.
With that kind of change, though, would it be necessary to expand the council possibly?
I don't know necessarily that it would. There are a lot of issues with the population varying so much in the different counties. But I think that, I don't think necessarily, I don't think those two go hand in hand. Kind of getting back, though, to putting legislative authority under the county council, my one hesitation about that is that the state legislature has been moving towards authorizing the county council to have more fiscal responsibility countywide. We are this year, for the first time, reviewing every property tax-funded budget in the county. Now we're doing that without any really authority to change those budgets, but if that trend continued, they gave that responsibility to county councils because right now county councils only do one thing. They have the fiscal responsibility for the county, so they tend to do it very well. We are much more in tune with the budgets and the ways and means, if you will, of county government. much more so than our counterparts in city government. The city council does not spend near the time on the budget process that the county council does, because it's one of many things they do with all the legislative authority. And so I think that you have to be very careful to balance those two things, and to move both a stronger fiscal responsibility as well as legislative authority onto a county council's shoulders. It gives me a little bit of pause, because I think that they would not necessarily, those council bodies going into the future wouldn't necessarily be able to pay as much attention as they probably should to all of those property tax funded budgets. And I think that's the most important function, is paying attention to the taxes.
That's an excellent observation.
I think you're right. You've got to just make a distinction first before you make the move to change. You've got to decide what you want that county council role to be. Do you want it to be a legislative role, or do you want it to be the overall fiscal seer of the tax dollar? And I think that's the problem that's missing right now, and people are scrambling to figure out why their tax dollars go up, because it's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and a little bit here, and there's nobody watching out for the overall big picture. So to your point, Paul, I would agree with you that you got to decide that first and then move forward with whatever change needs to happen.
Absolutely, and maybe the solution is that there is a separate county-wide tax authority board that really has some teeth. I mean, currently, the county council has been enabled with that power, if you will, but we have absolutely no authority to do much about it. And I think that that's what the taxpayers deserve, is somebody who's really at the local level able to focus on, okay, what are all the pieces of pie, how are those individual tax bills being affected by all these layers of government that are putting requests in.
Any other thoughts?
Well, that's what I was leading to when I said about a lot more responsibility and everything. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the county council, the 7 of us, each of us have responsibilities to different departments as far as being liaisons with them, and that we have a lot of meetings and activity like that that's outside of the council chamber. And if we have to take on the responsibility of overseeing everybody's budgets in the whole county, I mean, from the cities to the towns and everything else, that workload to do an adequate job needs to be spread out over more than 7 people.
So are you suggesting a larger county council, or are you suggesting yet an independent board to oversee that? Because I don't know that the citizens of this community want to see more elected officials, and that certainly seems to be something that the state's moving away from right now.
I think if nothing else, if you take the legislative functions into the council, you guys, it's going to become a full-time job. I mean, you are going to have the districts that you guys have, and people are going to want legislation in the county. It's going to be a full-time job to be a county council member for the county if you have all those responsibilities to do well.
The
Right,
city
definitely.
council is part-time.
That's
I agree that given how we do our jobs now, I think county council is a lot more hands-on, to Councilman Buskirk's point, to Roy's point. We are much more hands-on with departments than I think our counterparts are in city government, or some of us are. You know, you always have a range of personalities in any type of elected position. But I mean, it definitely could be, but I kind of hesitate to, since we don't even have full-time state legislators, I'm hesitant to say the county council member should be full-time.
And I think the reason we do have the distinction of where the council works with liaison is they're technically independently elected officials to represent a constituency. But to your point of that is, I would go and say, if you ask the average citizen to name all the elected officials, and I'm telling you, from county council on down, they would struggle to name all of our elected officials. And I think that's where we get into I represent people, but the people don't know who I am and what I do. And that's the part that shows me, do we really need that as an elected position, or can it be appointed by someone? And yeah, it's giving someone a lot of power, but that would be a person that would have to be elected.
I have to dovetail on to Sheriff Reese's comment, because if you add that legislative component to the council, it just, to me, in my mind, again, a full-time job, and then you're having to have 7 people having to coordinate like the 3-member county commissioners currently do, but yet would be one person. You know, it's just, the dynamic seems awfully great to try to maneuver all of those types of things that, as a liaison, as Councilman Buskirk, I mean, you're going to have certain departments you're interested in and oversee, and Councilman Hughes has hers. It's just going to be, again, one of those trying to, well, I guess, lack of a better term, barter and trade, to try to see what you can get on the table and actually get some action. So is it really forward, or is it pretty much just redefining and reshuffling it to do the same thing in the same, under the same scenario that we currently are in?
Well, part of it seems somewhat fundamental as well. I mean, the idea of taking from the commissioners the idea of being the executive and the legislative body, and having an executive and a legislative body. Doesn't that make some sense?
It's the check and balance.
And it's also the model that people are familiar with, federal, state, and local. But I do think we need to remember, as we look at Allen County specifically, on how it works, and the folks that are actually in these elected positions, we've seemed to have come together over time. The electorate has selected a group of folks that are pretty highly qualified, and I'll leave myself out of that. But the people I see in this room are dedicated to do a really good job. This whole concept of the effect that's created by democracy is, we do have to think about that, and that was actually mentioned by Randall Shepard the week before the IACC meeting, before they actually announced in the 27 points of the Kernan Shepard report. So academically, it's one thing, but practically and what really is best.
And that's a good point, because the folks who worked on the commission were very diligent and took very great pains to remind taxpayers that elected officials in the state are very hardworking and very noble people, so that no one would feel slighted by the recommendations that were made. Let's move on to one of the other recommendations, and we touched on this earlier, the transfer of responsibility for administering the duties of, and this would be expanded responsibility for the county executive, transferring the responsibility for administering the duties of the county auditor, treasurer, recorder, assessor, surveyor, sheriff, and coroner to the county executive. That's a big one. So obviously, these are positions that are elected now, the idea being that these would be duties now where the county executive would appoint folks in those roles. Let's go ahead and get into that one.
Well, Vince, besides being county treasurer, I'm also president of the Indiana County Treasurers Association, and as a group, we've kind of taken a position. The founding fathers in the Constitution said that we want an auditor, a treasurer, a recorder, assessor, and it's worked well for a number of years. So you hear antiquated, old versus antiquated. Well, yeah, it is old, and the Constitution is old also. Is it antiquated? Well, one thing that we're not hearing coming out of the Kernan Shepard report is really, if you're going to change the Constitution, there really ought to be some concrete reasons to do so. Big savings in dollars, big increase in productivity, something of that nature, and I just don't hear that along with it. I kind of come back to the question of why. Because it's old. As an elected official, my focus is on the taxpayer. As an appointed person, I would probably first take a look at the boss that hired me first, and then maybe the taxpayer second. So I kind of like the way it is.
Bob's hit on something very important there, in that appointed positions don't make for bold decision making. Appointed position make for a situation where you think first about what's going to make my boss happy versus what's going to serve the community the best. I think we've gotten a little bit frustrated here at times with a government structure that sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense. Offices that sound alike, too many offices that share a piece of the same transaction. Instead of throwing out the entire system of elected government here, like what the commission is quite frankly recommending that we do, why don't we take a look at consolidating some of these offices? In the state of Florida, for example, where one of my uncles used to serve as a county commissioner, the clerk of the courts and the county recorder are the same person. It is a county clerk. We've got an awful lot of municipal clerks in this county, county clerk, county recorder, who really, we could at some point in the future, I think, take a look at making those one person, but not an appointed person. In 2006, when I ran for election, you had two people on the ticket for county recorder who were very good, very well-meaning people, but two very different people. The voters had a choice. The voters don't have a choice if you take that away from them.
Good point.
Well, I think, I like what Bob and John both said, because if you go back to the single executive and expanding the role of county council, are you losing any elected officials, or are you just expanding and creating a power base that's greater than it is today, only restructured? And then that goes to the point of appointing other officials to do jobs that are a function of politics and of taxes, that you want to have the best people in there to serve in the best role they can to serve the taxpayers. I think Bob said it very well. You're thinking of the boss first if you're appointed. To think of an appointed position responding to one single county executive along with county council is a pyramid scheme, and I don't know too many pyramid schemes that have worked very well. Accountability is big for me when you look at the taxpayer. I have to face 350,000 people as the county surveyor, and those are the people I respond to. If my whole response is to an executive, my playback to those 350,000 is through that person. They don't necessarily get to interact with that person, but they might think they are. It comes to the point of what I've said many a time on the Kernan Shepherd report, is that any government restructuring should not reduce responsibility or representation that is to the people. Representation, we live in a representative government. I don't think that should ever go away. If it's not going to save any money, if the efficiencies aren't there, it shouldn't happen. If there's a lack of accountability, it shouldn't be there. So that's my 2 cents on looking at redefining jobs. So, because I think we all serve the public. That's
sure.
And that's what I say. As an elected official, I am responsible to no one. I am responsible to everyone. And like they've all said, if you're going to start looking at your boss first, and if you don't make him happy, you're not going to have that job anymore. And just because you got appointed to that position doesn't mean you're the best person for it. The voters are the ones that decide, after they've based all their information on the facts they've been given, who's the best person for that job. And all of us as elected officials are responsible to everyone out there, not just one. And I think that's the biggest thing about not having the elected officials appointed, because we're going to be worried about what's this top dog going to say about this decision I made, and is it going to be the right decision for the voters and the taxpayers, or to make sure I can keep my job?
Other thoughts? Therese?
I think the one thing that you would have to watch very much, if you have a single person making these appointments, that it's going to be the good old boys club. It's going to be a reward situation and not really looking at the qualifications of the individual being appointed. I think one thing that they should do with most of these offices is eliminate the term limitations that they have on them. When you have a very qualified person, why should their activity and their work be limited to 8 years? And the other thing is, too, if you go to appointed positions, believe it or not, to get the caliber of people that we presently have and working in our offices, you'd probably have to pay more. You wouldn't be able to hire the professional off the street to take the position.
I think one of the things that sounds like it's not being stated, but really is what needs to be stated, and that under the current system, there's transparency. I believe there's accountability in as much we are elected, and under the elected process, we hold a 4-year term, and under the 4-year term, if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we can be impeached. I mean, we are individually held accountable. As clerk of the court, I don't have a boss, as Sheriff Free says. It's the taxpayer, it's the constituency, but I also serve the Board of Judges. In one capacity, I at times have been called to call them on their performance. And if I am their employee, if someone says they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing in a particular motion or a particular thing under trial rule, then I am going to be looking at the boss going, gee, what's in the best interest of making them look good versus doing what is required of me? Because some of the same rules that apply locally don't apply at the state level. Some of these rules don't apply to the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. So being in an appointed position, you can't compare, for the sake of this whole conversation, that the clerk of the court of the state is in the same capacity, and to use that model, that it would work as sufficiently into the betterment for the community and making sure that the right decisions are being made.
One of the issues that we probably do need to address is, I think as an auditor, my job is getting more technical and more complex. And there are no qualifications for it. And we've been so fortunate here in Allen County, and we have really qualified professional elected officials. And as long as that was always the case, we'd be fine. But maybe we do need to be proactive and to look into, maybe these do need to be appointments at some time. I think for any job, there are certain qualifications. You need to have your bachelor's degree. You need years of experience. They're just, for these jobs, are just so important that, I don't know. I can see the other side of it too, where maybe they should be appointments, because you could have anyone running for elected office that totally is unqualified. So. That'll get them going. Yeah, we'll get them started with that.
Then you're saying the voters are ignorant, that they haven't been able to pay attention, that they haven't been able to make a wise decision, and I believe the voters are much more intelligent than that. And what concerns me the most about having them appointed is, if you help this person get elected, then I'm going to promise you a position, because we've seen it happen in city government, that you help me get elected, we're going to give you a position, and not based on qualifications. And I believe the voters are smart enough to decide who is most qualified, who isn't most qualified. And if they made a mistake 4 years later, they get to change their mind.
But we know a lot of times it's name recognition, or it's different things that people vote for, unfortunately.
Which concerns me greatly about having one county executive, because once they get elected, good luck ever getting them out, because the power of the incumbency is there. And, if the people they appoint make mistakes, well, they're gone, but this guy stays in power, or this woman stays in power, and maybe shouldn't be.
And on the note of training or qualifications, I sit on the Association of Indiana Counties Executive Board, and one of the recommendations that we have, not so much that a person has to have qualifications, but as much needs to be certified, and having training, meeting training qualification processes within a specific period of time to kind of go to the county assessor, township assessor level, where they have specific programs and tiers that they have to meet and be certified, and have that built into one of the qualifications, not necessarily before you walk in the door, but once you're in, that you are showing that you're being proactive, that you're learning the job, and that you are meeting a specified level of educational requirement, that you are taking the bull by the horns.
And I do agree with that. I actually sit on that AIC board, the Training and Education Board, but I think we need to have some statutes that make that mandatory then. We need mandatory additional training. We already have some by State Board of Accounts. We've got a lot of good programs, but I think the more certification and education that we all have, the better off, the whole community will be.
Or could we not address that by having someone appoint that person based on their qualifications, based on their abilities? To your point, there's always the risk anytime you have appointments. The commissioners make appointments to positions we have now. But when you look at the fact that, I go back to, if you ask every person outside of this building, we're in the city county building right now, who the elected officials are in our Allen County, and I'll bet you they get a couple names. Yeah, they'll get the sheriff, they might get a couple commissioners, but after that, they're going to struggle to figure out who the rest of us are. And so when I go back to looking at administrative roles versus policy-making roles, and I'm going to take the sheriff out of that because I've made up a decision on that, because I think you're kind of a unique animal in that you've got some arrest powers that the rest of us don't have. So is that policy?
So you want to be nice to him?
No, I look at it and I say, I look at it and say, are there some policies there that he can put in place for his officers to be more responsive to the citizens in a different manner than administrative roles? I think a lot of your office is administratively run, but there are other sections of it that aren't. And when I get back down to administration, needs to have qualified people, and we are very fortunate, to your point, in Allen County to have good people in office that do it. But let the electorate decide. Let the people of Allen County or any community decide how they want their government to look like. And that's the best thing at the end of the day. You can have everyone decide what kind of government you like. If you like some sort of, I wouldn't use the word pyramid scheme, but I'd call it accountability. It's not something that I would use from a time frame standpoint. But if I'm the county executive and things aren't going well in the county, I'm going to be unelected as well. I mean, from that perspective, to have one county.
Let me
Very
switch to
quickly,
John.
Darren's point provides a perfect segue here. How many times in this community in the last couple of years have we heard people say, I should have had a say in that. I wish we could have voted on that. I have never once heard anybody say to me, please make government easier for me. Please give me fewer choices. I've never heard that. And that is precisely what we're talking about doing here. We're talking about taking away an enormous number of choices that people have to make in how their government works.
Just
disagree with that.
well, you know, we like to talk about business models with the Kerner Shepherd report, and I think there is one that we need to remember. The system we have now is very entrepreneurial. We have these people, these elected officials in this room. They're willing to put their hand up and say, I will do a better job. I will do a good job at this position. They put themselves out on the line and ask the public to vote for me for certain reasons. They get into office, they put an oath of office out to the public, and they're expected to honor that. And I think at that point, then the electorate can vote them out. And maybe part of what we should be trying to do is go further in helping the public understand what we do and why we do it, and continually try to get more input. And I think that's where the openness that the commissioners have plugged into of the commissioner's office. We're doing more public education about how government is involved with certain things. So I think there's this entrepreneurial feature. That's the key point that I wanted to make. That everybody in this room is willing to be somewhat of an entrepreneur and say, I will go out and I will take that public trust and that public responsibility on my shoulders.
The state is making steps on as far as qualifications for the different positions. I mean, you have it in the assessor's office, you have it in the coroner's office recently. So, I mean, the state legislation is going that same direction as far as getting better people for the different offices, better qualified people.
You know, I like what Roy just said. They also have it for the surveyor's office
Yeah, they do.
as a registered professional, you know. But I don't think it's fair to say that because people don't know the name of their elected officials that they're disenchanted or disenfranchised with government. Probably the same people can't name the President of the United States. Ever see jaywalking? Right. Some people, you know, it's just the way it is. I don't know that we've done a very good job in government education, not us, but in our the way people come of age and understand what government structure is. The fact that people can't name their elected officials is to me somewhat disheartening. But then again, the number of people that don't vote is even more disheartening. The fact that you go to a country that is a third world country and everybody votes whether they're forced to or not, and we go here and we have such a lack of interest in voting. That's probably what we ought to really be focusing on.
But is that because they have no idea what the office holds and what they do in some particular cases? That may be the case. I mean,
I think it's because a lot of them don't care.
Well, there's apathy. Of course, there's apathy. But in reality, if you to John's point of, you know, voters want to have a say in what they do. Right now, they don't know where to go half the time in county government because we are so convoluted, and each person has that. I get phone calls for things that I have no idea. I have a phone call right now on a zoning ordinance for Brooks Construction that they want me to talk to them about because it's in my district. It has nothing to do with what I do, but I'm going to have to, you know, figure out and wade through those kinds of things. But I think that's the problem is people don't understand county government because it's got so many different elected pieces that they have problems with it.
But to John's point earlier, though, so by appointing them, it's not going to reduce the number of jobs.
No, but you've got a single point of contact. You can go to that one point of whether it's the...
I wouldn't want to answer that phone. That would be 24 hours a day.
But that is part of the logic behind it. I mean,
To the point, Darren, you brought up
So we need
of
to
answering a
implement
Brooks zoning question, though, you're fiscal. Why not direct that to the zoning area, to the planning?
And
I
that
mean,
will.
that's where people start to figure out, oh, I should have went there. And then you have done your part to influence that, you know, education.
I know exactly how to handle it, Alan. I will. I'll make sure the follow-through goes through. Thanks, though. But I appreciate that. The issue is, that's what people don't, my point was,
Right.
they don't know where to go. That's my point. So it's my job to educate them and move them along in the process.
I think that's pretty much every person's job sitting in this room as an elected individual. Some of us have been around for a while, some of us are new. But as you go through the course of the day, the month, the year, the years, You are a point of entry for someone that you cross paths with, and they ask you a question, and you say, sorry, that's a county auditor question, we'll transfer you, or that's a question for the commissioner's office. I mean, I think that there's been times where it's referred this whole process is that we don't get along, that we don't talk to each other, that we don't get things done, that there's walls between us, and I don't believe that that's the case. I think that there's different individuals, depending on their need, they know where to go. They get pretty close, and then we just help them get the rest of the way. But to lean to another comment with Al, it's Civics 101. I think it went out when I graduated from high school, U.S. government. Does anybody really know their government structure? I don't think they do. That's become very apparent. But only, unfortunately, when people find the frustration, do they decide they're going to check in. And when they get there, they learn pretty quickly, just as all of us do. If you're going to go buy carpet or you're going to buy something or do something, you check in when it's time for you to figure out what you got to do to get the answer, or to at least get where you got to go to whether you like the answer or not.
I would agree with that. I think the average citizen wants their services. They want those services to be efficient. They want their taxes kept low. But in terms of understanding every facet of how government works, I don't think they really want to know.
No.
I don't think they care.
Well, they leave it to us.
That's right.
That's why they elected us.
And that's one thing I was going to bring up, but hopefully before we get done, is several times I've heard in here today how lucky we are that we have all these great elected officials here. And I mean, it's not luck. It's because the voters paid attention. The voters had a choice, and the voters made the choice. It's not luck. It's because we did our jobs and the voters did their jobs. And I would hate to take that away from them and have one county executive just appoint everybody.
To dovetail on what the sheriff's saying, I look around the room, most elected officials here testify on behalf of their areas in front of legislators. Stacy is considered one of the foremost authorities on assessing, and Lisa and her association as auditor. And I wonder if we're appointed, whether that voice would kind of get lost down the chain. Would we have the opportunity to lead functional areas? Would we have an opportunity to testify before legislators, or would we be an employee, down on the scale?
An excellent discussion, and we've heard a little from both sides on that, so excellent. Let's move on. Another recommendation is to create a county-wide body to oversee the provision of all public safety services, as well as to consolidate emergency public safety dispatch by county or multi-county region, requiring that local emergency communication systems be compatible with the statewide 800 megahertz system. Well, let's talk initially about the idea of creating a county-wide body for public safety services. And Sheriff, let's start with you.
I assume the sheriff is in charge of that.
Say all that.
I didn't see that. It's a very difficult question, because I look at how the city runs and the different issues they have as opposed to the county. And though the sheriff is responsible for everything in the county, though some people may say that I'm not, or the sheriff's office is not, we are. We have authority every place. So basically, they've already set that up with the sheriff's office. Now, would anybody in the sheriff's office want to go take over any other police agency? No. I think it functions well the way it is with the duplication of services you have with both city and county police. They focus mainly in the city. We focus mainly outside the county. We have authority every place. I don't know. I know it's all based on Homeland Security, that it's going to be smoother, but I don't see where you get any benefits from it.
But it goes beyond simply police protection. My understanding is it would go to fire protection as well, and the idea of making it consistent so that no matter where you live, you'd have the same level.
And who pays for that? Because it's going to go up. I mean, the volunteer fire departments outside the city limits of Fort Wayne do a great job responding, but their volunteers are unpaid. So certainly property taxes are going to have to go up to pay for that equipment, those firemen. So it's going to cost more money. And granted, you may have hazmat teams inside Fort Wayne, but they respond out in the county. We have to decide, do we want to have more hazmat teams out in the county that maybe don't get used? We're going to continue to have the MOUs that we have in place now so they can respond out and help. You set a structure up like that where you're going to have paid firemen throughout the county, it's going to cost more money.
But should the quality of public safety that I receive depend on where I live?
I don't think it does.
My my hesitation with that kind of statement is that we're forgetting a very basic premise of how government is established. Counties were formed and then cities formed when like-minded people came together and said, we want service over and above what the county is providing. So yes, people that live in a city have deliberately chosen to have a higher level of service and pay higher taxes. That is how it works functionally, structurally. Yes, if you live within a city, you're saying, I want to pay higher taxes. I mean, that is what you're doing by buying a property in the city. I want to have a higher level of service. I want to be closer to the center of the community. It's a very exaggerated example in Allen County because we have such a large metropolitan area with Fort Wayne, but then the large rural geographic area out in the county. I think that people do say, I want to pay more taxes because I want that higher level of service. And people in the county say, I don't want to pay those high taxes, and I don't care that I don't want to, I'll pay somebody separately to plow my street. I'll pay somebody separately to pick up my trash. And we'll have our volunteers, we'll come together on our own to provide that fire service.
Other thoughts?
And going along with that, it's the same thing that when you live with a volunteer fire department, you pay a higher fire insurance on your home and everything than what you do in the city, because you have the trade-off of paying higher taxes in the city.
I think it's interesting, Sheriff Friese and Paula both hit on it, without saying it. This expansion is the next level of taxation that just takes everything to a whole new height, and we're talking about reduction of taxes and taking services and making them more efficient. When you begin to look at expansion of services out into the rural areas, as Paula brought up, your dollars get pretty expensive to try to service 10 homes in a square mile, when in the city you're servicing 500 in a square mile. It's a big issue. So it kind of leads me to think, we have a pretty good system right now.
Yeah, the cost is just like this show here, in the fact that I'm out in the county and I do not receive Comcast. So this show is not available for me.
And if you wanted it, come to the city.
We'll get you a people should sing this. It should be mandatory viewing.
From maybe a roundabout thought here, but is this almost annexation? I mean, your representation without, taxation without representation, but yet then again, it's annexation. That do they want it or don't they want it? And obviously, go back to let them vote for it if the populace wants that. But it kind of, I'm now going to be paying more taxes, but I really didn't want that because I live out here and my voice.
And they believe they're getting a great service from
and
the
they think
sheriff's
everything's
department.
fine, so that's everything. Yeah,
all of it.
Yeah.
One more comment, then we'll move on.
I look at it a little bit differently. It's not so much the quality of service, but overseeing the services to make sure that whatever administratively crossover they can do to help provide, in your case, a hazmat. The county wouldn't necessarily want a hazmat team if the city has a hazmat team, and you can have that memorandum of understanding and know that, in the event of something, you're going to be the one providing the services. I think that's where I look at it more so than making sure I got a fire response time of 3 minutes everywhere in Allen County. I don't think that's the case.
And that's already in place.
Right, and that's, yeah, right.
At the end of the day, it is a county-wide enterprise. I think we need to keep that in mind.
Right.
The question is, though, under a system like this, can you plan more effectively? Can you do some things without tripping over each other's feet? Is there duplication that exists under the current system that might not exist if you went to a countywide system of this basis?
Let's move on to two other recommendations. Transferring the responsibility for all funding of the state's trial court system to the state, including public defenders and probation, and moving the funding of child welfare from counties to the state. Thoughts on that?
Sorry,
Done.
the welfare
Done.
is that's off the table. I just want to throw this out on the table because thought process here is that now the court is the big behemoth of the world and everything, and there's two components to the process. You have the civil side and you have the criminal side. And on the civil side, you have individuals paying because they're suing someone, they're going through an unfortunate divorce, they're going through something. So there's one aspect. Then there's the criminal side that the sheriff and the council and everybody has to deal with, and it's the scourge of the whole tax process, but yet it's really a mirror of what's going on in our society. That's my bully pulpit there for a moment, but that's something obviously that has to be dealt with. That's escalating in cost. That's a lot of the problem. But getting beyond that, is it the primary role of the state government to be in control of the judiciary, to go back then to locally elected judges versus state-appointed judges? Do the people recognize that their judges are their representation, even though to some degree, yes, they're paid for by the state? It's kind of, to me, a tit for tat. We move it to the state. Are taxes not going to still go up? You're going to lose tax base here. Are you still going to have enough money to be able to operate local government to the level that you want? Fine, it goes to the state. Sales tax goes up. At some point, there's a breaking point. But to me, there's still that level of accountability of the third branch still being locally funded.
I'm going to disagree fundamentally with that, because right now the way the courts are set up, even though the judges are elected locally, all but $5,000 of their salary is paid for by state, and their budgets are in large part mandated by the state, by actions that they are, we are all the time being told how much we're going to pay the public defenders, the prosecutors. I mean, the state is telling us at the local level, here's how much you have to put into that budget. And from my perspective as a county council person, I think that if the state is going to mandate how a budget operates, and I continue to applaud the move of the welfare services from the local property tax budget to the state tax budget, because we had absolutely no control over that budget, and I see the court budgets going exactly the same way. In Allen County last year, we voted to not increase the child welfare budget. We said, no, it's out of control. It was going up by almost 30% in 1 year.
46, yeah.
46%. Yeah. 2 years back then. It went up 30% the first year and then 46 the next. And we had, when we said no at the local level, that's ridiculous. You need to reevaluate how you provide those services. The state overturned our ruling and said, sorry, folks, Allen County has to pay that higher tax rate.
I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, quite honestly, but I guess from a different standpoint, I look at school funding formulas and the school general fund going to the state, and knowing that in recent conversations, you kind of open a bag of worms, that if the state takes it all over, then those areas that haven't been paying, sort of like the universal county taking over everything and people getting certain things that they said they didn't want, fire protection or however they want that to be done, paying higher taxes, you're going to start seeing different services being paid for by DeKalb County, that Allen County is the scourge of the northeastern part of the state for everybody that's in the northeast region, and they're going to be paying more to deliver. They're fine the way they are. So I guess I kind of want to throw that on the table, that they take it over, it changes the whole schematic to me of how everything's doled back out to the community and the level that they're going to get.
Well, part of that is the fact that it's a broader tax base, because it's statewide tax base instead of individual counties. I thought it was very interesting just this last week, received a letter in which our auditor was able to get 40% reimbursement for public defenders. So doing the math, it come up that it's $7,200 a day that the county share is that we have to pick up on public defenders. $7,200 a day that it's costing us for public defenders. Crime does not stop at the county line.
No, that's true.
And that's the reason I feel that it should be a statewide situation and not individual counties.
What are other counties having to pay for public defenders per day? I mean, if we're paying $7,200, is it the same statewide, or are we paying higher?
But aren't we really missing where the cost is? I mean, as the courts will appropriately tell us many times, the cost of public safety in Allen County isn't in the court system. It's not with the public defender. It's not with the prosecutor. It's in the jail.
Right.
And with the things that the sheriff does. If we need some relief, and if that's what this is intended to do, that's where we need the help.
It's been some great discussion so far. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk about the whole idea of restructuring in general. I mean, no specific recommendations, but just the idea, does local government need to be restructured? I mean, a lot of things we've talked about, there's been some pro and con, and some, it's not broken, why fix it? What do we think in general? Sure.
I think each one of us in our own jobs are capable of restructuring a lot of the things that we do. And I have a problem with the state saying that all counties are the same, it all needs to be restructured, because each county is different based on the geography, based on the population. So one size doesn't fit all. And I think in the end it needs to be left up to the voters to take a look at it. But we as elected officials need to look at our own jobs, council, at how they do things, how can they make it more efficient. And through all the things that we do, maybe we can say, yeah, these things need to be combined. Like John said, maybe these two jobs should be combined. But to have the state mandate that things get changed, I disagree with statewide, because every county is not the same.
Well, as opposed to mandates, are there areas where the state should loosen up and allow us more flexibility?
We're probably all for more home rule, I would say. I think everybody in this room would say we need home rule.
Let's control our own destiny.
Yes, absolutely.
I think, Vince, if you look at a number of the things that are being discussed here, you've heard some of the disagreement, you've heard some of the agreement at this table. But I think, without exception, everybody at this table would say that if there are things that are going to be done, they have to be decided at the local level with respect to reorganization, with respect to controlling our own destiny for the people that we represent. One of the things that strikes me interesting with this entire report is that there's 8 recommendations pointed at county. There's 2 pointed at the townships that actually dovetail back into the county. There's 3 that are focused on cities and towns. Well, the county only represents about 18% of a taxpayer's tax. The cities and towns about 19%. The schools, on the other hand, represent about 50%. So while this entire effort from the state legislature, from the Kern and Shepherd report, is being focused on city and mostly county government, the fact of the matter is what's happening to taxpayers isn't happening because of city and county government.
Excellent point. I think Nelson hit the nail right on the head there. This whole study started off with a very interesting premise, and right under the streamlining local government, we've got to stop governing like this. What a subliminal message is that, to say something's wrong, but who said something's wrong? And I'm not saying there's not fixes or efficiencies that couldn't be built in, even if you did it interdepartmentally, but to start off with the premise that something is already wrong and we got to fix that, and then to say we took 700 citizens contributed out of 6.5 million in Indiana. That's a pretty small percentage, I think. It doesn't say that all 700 said there's something wrong. They may have had suggestions, but I think this whole report started off on the wrong premise. We've got to stop doing something because something's wrong, and there's no definition of what's wrong.
Sure.
Workflow process changes in our homes, in our businesses, everywhere as we learn how to do our jobs more effectively, as different tools become available, as technology gets better. We're allowed in most facets of our lives to reorganize and get faster, better, cheaper, except in county government. That's what I meant earlier. We need to look at form-fitting function more than eliminating choice. Eliminating these elected positions, it makes more sense to structure ourselves in a way that lets people get in and out the door faster. That's what we really ought to be focused on here, is bringing together the pieces of my job that are in my office or across the street at Therese's office or downstairs at Lisa's office. Let's bring those together in one place. Make county government make more sense. Don't make it go away.
You're going to have the last word, about 30 seconds.
Well, I would say that the biggest thing is we need to start from a clean slate, decide what functions we're going to do as a government, deliver those services in the most efficient, effective manner we have with whatever elected officials that needs to be, and let the voters decide who's going to make that choice. Is up to them and what we do.
I've got to tell you, this has been outstanding. I mean, I don't think the last time I've been in a room with so many distinguished elected officials, this is really great. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with our viewers today. That's all the time we have for this segment. This is produced and sponsored by City TV, as well as the Mike Down Center for Indiana Politics at IPFW. I'm Vince Robinson of Inc. Newspaper and Fort Wayne Reader. Thanks for watching. We'll have companion shows. This one dealt with county government. We will also have a program dealing with township government, schools, and municipal government. Thanks for watching.